Here's what you should learn in the first 12 months of guitar. Your very first month of guitar is going to be crazy. You're going to have to learn how to handle the instrument, how to hold it, what the right techniques are. You're probably going to be going through tons of YouTube videos and getting a bunch of conflicting advice. But the two simple goals that you can set yourself are to learn the basic technique of how to play guitar, which for most people means guitar on the right leg, arm on top over the sound hole, your left hand position with the thumb on the neck of the guitar or around the top for open chords, and using multiple fingers to press the strings down right next to the metal bar that we call the frets, so that when you play on this side, you can create a sound. With basic strumming technique being down and up strums that you combine for rhythm. And just in general, understanding the parts of the guitar like the tuners and how to tune, while you start building and developing your finger muscles to play and hold down these strings. But the second big goal that you can set yourself in the first month is to learn 4 chords. And not just any 4 chords, but the 4 chords. You see, most songs are actually just made up of the same 4 chords. These are the most important chords that you can learn, and if you can get these 4 down, you can start to play thousands of songs. So the first 4 chords that I give my students to learn are the G chord, the E minor chord, the C chord, and the D chord. Don't get it twisted, these are going to be pretty difficult to do in the first month, but try to see if you can learn and memorize the basic shape pattern and start practicing moving between pairs of chords. Because by your second month, you should be working on your strumming and rhythm patterns and your changes between these chords so that you can conquer a song. Now, you've probably already looked up a song or two while you're doing this, but the most important thing you can be doing right now is building up your muscle memory with these chord positions, because you're going to use them for the rest of your life. So you need to take something like this C chord and work out a basic strumming pattern that falls on the beat. Some kind of rhythm that you can pull out of your back pocket and use to practice chords. It could be something like down, down, up, up, down, up. You want to make sure you're strumming in the right direction and that you're able to hold a consistent rhythm and tempo. And so your practice could look something like this: C major with your strumming pattern, and then practicing that transition so there's no gaps when you move to the next chord. All the while, your fingers are going to be developing calluses, which are going to make these chord positions easier and let you start to learn the songs that you want while eliminating any of the gaps between these chords as you get more practice. And during this process, you would hope to get at least maybe 1 song down by the end of the month. And I'm talking about a complete song, which might sound like a lot, but there's a ton of songs like Zombie by the Cranberries that are literally just those 4 chords with the right strumming pattern in the right order all the way throughout the song, which you're going to expand by the 3rd month of your guitar training. You're likely to have already looked up a couple of song intros, but I'm going to stress throughout this entire year of guitar that you should focus on learning complete songs. You want to learn how to do sections, you want to learn how to go back and forth between different groups of chords, and you want to make sure you're able to keep your stamina up for an entire 3.5-minute song rather than just playing 20 seconds over and over and over. So by this month, you should start thinking about having 2 to 4 complete strumming songs that you can have down. Alongside Zombie by the Cranberries, you could pick something like Take Me Home Country Roads, which uses the same set of 4 chords. You could play that song Broken Window Serenade by Whiskey Myers, which I just put a tutorial out for and is only 2 chords. So it shouldn't be difficult for you to get a few songs down, and at the same time, you should start to try to explore different ways to play these chords. I'm talking about arpeggios and plucking through the chords instead of just simply strumming them the same way every time. You don't need to expand past these chords, but you do need to expand how you play these chords. Because in the 4th month, you're going to set yourself another goal. Alongside these chords, you're going to try to learn your first scale. And again, maybe you've done this the entire time, but having one scale memorized and learning how to use it is really important down the road in guitar. You could pick something like the E minor pentatonic scale, which is super easy to remember. It's only 2 notes per string, and it's super easy to play. You'll want to get experience playing single note passages, which we call melody in music, so that maybe when you're in the middle of playing a chord, you can pull out a little riff. And if you saw what I just did there, dragging my finger between groups of notes is called a guitar slide, which is important because I think by this point you should start exploring the options of how to play notes on the guitar using different expressive techniques. Guitar slides being one of them, but vibrato when you wiggle the note, hammer-ons when you tap the note out with just the strength of your finger, pull-offs when you take your finger and pull down the string to reveal a note behind it, and guitar bends when you use the strength of multiple fingers to push up a string and change the pitch, are all great examples of expressive techniques. And the key to probably a lot of your favorite songs is learning how to do at least one of those so that the notes don't come out clunky and the same every single time. As a quick caveat, these tips I'm giving you, I don't expect you to master within the month that I'm telling you, but I'm just giving you a little bit of a roadmap in terms of what you should be thinking about as you go along. You might work at a faster pace or a slower pace than some of these tips, but as you're moving along, just keep these ideas in mind and move on to the next month. Because by month 5, you should start to string along larger groups of chords. Because I know you haven't been following this list perfectly. In fact, you've probably been enticed to learn songs that you love and notice that there's more than just the basic 4 chords that I showed. You might have been trying to learn a song and run into a chord like A minor or something like D7. Those chords aren't particularly difficult to play, so you probably learned them and said, "Ha, Will, I didn't follow your list, I'm actually going ahead." And to you I say, "Ha, I anticipated it and I built it into this list." You're gonna take this larger set of chords beyond the original 4 and start to string together chord progressions that are longer than 4 chords. A great example could be the simple chords to the song Wish You Were Here, which starts with the C chord, then the D chord, then the A minor chord, then the G chord, then the D chord, then the C chord, then the A minor chord, then the G chord, and the riff starts on that E minor chord. You've probably built up a great connection between the C, D, E minor, and G chords, but every new chord that you get presents a new connection between a group of chords. And there's no substitution for literally just time spent building the relationships between these chords. You need to know how it feels to go from A minor to D and back and forth. And you need to think about the shortcuts between chords like C and A minor, where you only have to move the ring finger and leave these 2 down. So with every new chord that you bring into the fold, take some time and look at how it interacts with all the other chords that you already know. Because in your 6th month, you're gonna try to have at least 5 to 6 complete songs down, which if you do the math works out to roughly 1 complete song a month. And no, I'm not talking about all these intros that you've learned so that you can say, "Look, Ma, I learned 1,000 different songs in 5 days." Playing the SpongeBob theme song does not count as learning a full song, unless you're watching my tutorial for The Fool That Ripped His Pants, which is about 1.5 minutes and goes through a pretty good selection of chords. But this is a good month to take things slow, not try to add new information, but bring in all of the stuff you've learned and apply it to songs. You need to constantly take what you've been doing and apply it to real life. You know that thing outside the window? That's called real life. There's this green stuff out there that a few of us should probably touch. I'll also add that somewhere in this midst of your first 6 months, you should probably start to take some time and learn the note names on the guitar fretboard. Whoa, Nelly, now hold on. I'm not telling you to memorize your fretboard. All I'm telling you is that you should learn your musical alphabet, the order that the notes go down the strings. I would hope that you know the name of the strings, and maybe at this point you should be able to take something like the E string and count up the note names as you move to the next fret, knowing that this is F. And then beyond that, F sharp, G, G sharp, knowing that it loops to A, and so on and so forth. You can build your own connections with these notes, and you're starting to understand the way the fretboard is laid out without too much pressure on memorization as you're working on all of these other things at this point. I'm the kind of teacher that constantly encourages you to try new things. There's always a thought about whether you should stick to one thing rigidly and become a master at it before you move along, like picking, or my style, which is to try to teach you a little bit of everything and help everything raise up at an equal level. I like doing this for a few reasons. One, because it gets boring doing the same thing over and over again. And the last thing you want in guitar is to be bored, because you will put down this incredibly difficult instrument pretty easily. So maybe by the 6th or 7th month in, you should start exploring different styles like finger style, or playing with a pick if you normally play with your fingers instead of strumming, or playing a song that is only plucked notes. I have a favorite saying that I've been using quite a bit, which is that a rising tide lifts all boats. It's the idea that if you're working really hard at one thing, it'll help you support other developments in other areas of your life, and I think this applies to guitar pretty well. Working on fingerstyle is going to vastly increase your coordination between your 2 hands, because you're going to have to coordinate 7 or 8 fingers while you're playing. This coordination will help you in other areas of the guitar. You'll connect more when you play with a pick because you understand the feeling of syncing up these 2 hands. Obviously, when you're playing chords, you're strengthening your fingers, but that can help you out in other elements of the guitar as well. I personally think in the entire first year of playing guitar, it doesn't necessarily matter exactly what you're doing, just that you're doing. The more you put your fingers on the guitar, the better at the guitar you will be. So I think you can try these different things out, see if you like them or not, and no matter what you're doing is going to be good for you. So let's keep them rolling, because by the 8th month, maybe you should start trying to explore speed on the guitar, including 16th note rhythmic patterns. Most of the songs that you run into are going to be in 8th note patterns, and you've probably learned a little bit of rhythm up to this point, so you understand that that just means you're down and you're down up strums. But what if you try to play a song like Wake Me Up by Avicii? or Master Exploder by Tenacious D. What you're listening to right now are 16th note rhythms. Rhythms that go twice as fast as the fastest rhythm that you've played up till now. And while I imagine it's going to be difficult for you to reach that speed, trying to boost and test your limits is the best way to excel on the guitar. You want to learn how to play fast, you need to put yourself in challenging situations, and one of the most challenging things to do is learn the proper technique for speed. If you're talking about strumming speed, you need to relax and loosen your wrist. We need to make sure that your strum is coming directly from your wrist and not from your entire arm, which stiffens up and is too large of a muscle group to control. You also need to be able to relax and make strums in small movements. So trying out different 16th note rhythms, which you can find a ton of online, is a great thing to do once you've got your basic chord positions down. Picking speed is also something you can consider working on. I've got a unique goal that I like to set for my students. I call it the ABCs of chords. So in your 9th month of guitar, you can start thinking about, can I do my ABCs of chords? And the point of this exercise is really to get you to look at 2 chord positions that you probably aren't able to do yet. The ABCs of chords means just going through your whole notes of chords, anything that's a regular letter without a sharp or flat, and making sure that you can do a major version of each of those chords. So you would start with something like A and make sure you can do an A major chord. And then you would move on to the next letter, which immediately is B. And the B chord is no joke. You could play B like this, which is your first introduction to bar chords, using one finger to cover multiple strings. Because I think this version of B is maybe a little bit too difficult for this point in your guitar career, I would encourage you to learn something like B7, which is a form of a B major chord with a flat 7, and it's a lot easier to play. There's no bar. You can play it with the 2nd fret on the A string and do 2, 1, 2, 0, 2 as the fret order. And you might say, hey Will, I'm up for the challenge, let's learn the bar version, but just wait, because you haven't seen what the rest of the ABCs of chords are, and the exercise you're supposed to do with it, because you go from A to B, and then you move on to C, which you probably already learned, D, which is another one of your basic chords, you'll learn the E major chord, and now you move on to F, which will be your first version of a bar chord. The first way most people learn how to play F is with the 3rd fret on the D string, the 2nd on the G, and you cover both of the first frets on the E and the B strings, and this is a little mini bar. And I like this bar a little bit better than the B chord as something you can start with, just to see if you have the finger strength and position to hold down 2 strings at the same time. Of course, there's a couple easy ways to play the F chord, and this can be challenging for a lot of people, so don't feel down if you can't get it even within your first year of guitar. But now is maybe the time to start focusing on it and challenging yourself to play bar chords, with F being the first one you should try, which then afterwards leads you to G, the end of your musical alphabet of whole tones. But the exercise is this: you're not just going to learn those chords, you're also going to try to transition those chords rhythmically in alphabetical order. Could set a tempo of something like this, and then roll through your chords one at a time, like A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. This is a lot more difficult than you think, because none of these chords really have a lot of notes in common. That means that you're going to be lifting almost all of your fingers every time. There's no trick, there's no secret to doing this, it's just good muscle memory and good practice. There's a couple of really cool techniques on the guitar that you don't realize are being performed when they're being performed, a lot of which are done with your strumming hand. Musicians are kind of like sleight of hand magicians. We do little tricks when you're not watching, and then when you're a beginner trying to learn the guitar and you play the exact same thing, you think to yourself, why is it not coming out nearly as good as it did from this guy? Well, one thing that you can start to pay attention to is something we call the palm mute, which is when you take the palm of your strumming hand and place it just in front of the end of your strings. By clamping your hands down on the strings and then strumming, you're creating a muted strum sound. But a muted strum that still has a little bit of noise coming out, which means you can take a strum that you would normally play like down, 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 up, and transition it into a muted sound, clamping your hand on the strings and playing down, 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 up. Notice what that does to my strum. It creates this intensely percussive sound, which is a lot more fun to listen to. And you might have also spied a little sleight of hand. Sometimes I'll lift my palm mute to create that open sound just for a second, like I did on the down up. Down, 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 and then lifting for down up creates more texture within the strum itself. Another rhythmic sleight of hand trick that strumming guitar players do is something called the chuck, which is a similar idea to the palm mute. You're going to be taking the open part of your hand and clamping it on the strings, but this time you don't want it to be near the end of your strings. You see, your goal here is to try to get your palm down simultaneously with your pick as you strum. If you can do that, both things at the same time, a strum and a clamp with your hand, you're going to create the chuck sound. Check this out. It's actually a lot harder than it looks to get the timing right. If you're just a little bit too early with your palm, you're not gonna get contact with the actual pick. But if you're too late with your palm, you're gonna have those strings ringing out in a way that you don't wanna hear. Used popularly in songs like, let's say, Island in the Sun by Weezer. Or 505 by the Arctic Monkeys. The chuck is normally applied to down strums because of the technique that it uses, and you can actually replace any down strum in any rhythm that you've ever learned with that muted technique. You can create a lot of cool percussive nuance. We're gonna set yourself kind of a funny goal for the 11th month. You're gonna try to learn 10 songs all the way through, giving you some wiggle room in terms of learning one song per month because you have all of this other stuff that you're already working on. But I actually think this goal is super easy to achieve, and you've probably already gotten up to here at this point. But keep in mind, if you're like, well, I already learned 10 songs in my first month. If you spent all of your time learning songs and none of the other things that I've mentioned in this video, you still have a lot of catch up to do. There's nothing particularly special about what you do when, although I'm laying out a list and a guideline for you that I think works. But if you're here at this point and you already know tons of songs, go back and try to figure out more things that you can try to do, like working on your technique and expression, or learning your scales, or mastering that bar chord that we tried in some of the earlier months. And if you say I've already done that and I've already learned all of these songs, then I would say the songs that you're picking are maybe a little bit too easy. Try to challenge yourself. At least 1 or 2 or 3 of those songs should be kind of difficult for you to play. You're gonna try to learn songs that are cool for you and not just basic 4-chord strumming with 0 nuance to them. Try a song that uses an arpeggio or finger style pattern, and then try one song that uses a chuck. And hey, I've got a bunch of tutorial videos out that you can check out and see if you can learn. I've been saving the hardest for last because the 12th month, I want you to try to do something special. There's a fundamental system of learning your fretboard called cage. And the cage system confuses everybody when you first explain it. The basic idea is that for every chord that you've learned on the guitar, the C chord, the D chord, the G chord, whatever, there's actually 5 ways to play that one chord down your entire fretboard. You don't just have one choice of the C major chord. You can play C major here, you can play C major here, you can play C major here, and you can play C major here. And there's only 5 because your guitar at some point starts to loop the same shapes over and over again. So you need to learn 5 big shapes of all of your chords. Now, this is the first year of your guitar, so maybe this is something you work on in year 2 and year 3 to master. But the idea comes from this. All you're gonna do is learn how to take an open position chord and turn it into a bar chord. And if you can do this in the 12th month of you learning guitar or within your first year, you'll be well on your way to understanding your fretboard a lot better. I try this with every single student. What I get them to do is to take a chord like A and to see if they can take this chord and move it up by 1 fret. That's it, that's the only instruction, just take the chord and move it up by 1 fret. And the answer everybody gives is to take their A chord, move all of their fingers up 1 fret and play it again, but it sounds kind of bad. Because the problem here is that you didn't actually take all of the notes of the A chord, and this is where bars come in. You need to look at the open strings that are played in the A chord, the open on the A string and the open on the bottom E, and you need to bring those up with you. You need to imagine that there is an invisible hand fretting this note behind the actual nut piece here. And as you move up your fingers to the 3rd fret, you need to bring all your open strings up to the 1st fret. If you do that correctly and you can visualize that this now looks like an A chord, but it sounds like a brand new chord because we lifted the pitch up by 1 fret, making it a B flat or an A sharp chord, then you will understand the idea of caged. All you're doing is taking open position shapes and moving them across your guitar with a bar. Just so we have a way to talk about those shapes, we sort of label them based on the visual representation of the chord we started with. This was an A chord that we bumped up the guitar, so we can call this the A shape. But the pitch is determined by where you are on your guitar. If you're playing the A shape, but on the 1st fret, you might call that the A shape of A sharp. The sound of an A sharp chord, but the looks of an A chord. There are 5 open chords that you can do this with, leading you to the 5 shapes of caged. And it's in that order: the C shape, the A shape, the G shape, the E, and the D. So take a C chord and see, can I move all of these frets up? This one's particularly difficult because there's some open strings. Might have to use more fingers in different spots, and then use your 1st finger as your bar to guide your open strings up with you as you shift your chord position down the neck. The G chord is ridiculously hard because you need to be able to stretch 2 frets over with your bar. You've got the last 3 fingers here making a G chord. Remembering that your open strings need to come up with you creates this shape, which a lot of people struggle with, and so you can also chop into different halves, like the bottom half and the top half. When you take the E chord shape with all of its open strings, bring it up 1 fret, it actually becomes this bar version of F that a lot of people grow to know. But in the Cage system, we would still call this the E shape of F. And then finally, the D chord, don't forget that you use this open string in the D chord, but only on that 1 string. You need to make sure to bring that along with you, which creates a pretty ridiculous stretch that looks something like this. If you can learn all of these things within your first year of guitar, you have literally nothing to worry about. You'll be as good of a guitar player as you want to be as long as you continue putting in the work. If you're not able to learn all of these things, don't worry. It doesn't mean that you're a bad guitar player. I think you should be focusing on the things that make you happy, that bring you joy, that make the instrument fun, and if you can do that, you can call playing guitar a success. Let me know what you think of these tips, or if you have more to add in the comment sections below. Check out my original music or support me for free on Patreon with the links in my profile. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.